Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Man, we are entering the part of the year where I think grass fishing is at its peak. You've got that tail end of summer, water temps start to cool. A lot of fish are getting into grass. You've got grass that's starting to die off, which is getting fish grouped up. Grass is just one of the best places to fish in general, but this time of year is one of the peak times to fish it. The problem with grass, though, is it can be very intimidating. And from that standpoint, I want to give you some tips and different lures and ways I attack fishing grass to help you break it down. You know, this is a question I get asked so many times, with respect to different types of baits and how you fish it. Because the reality is, if you fish pretty much anywhere in the country, there's a good chance that you have lakes that have a lot of submergent and emergent grasses. There are grasses that grow early in the year and then die off. There's grasses that grow more in the second half of the year. There's some grass that I think you just should try to avoid. There's other grass that no matter where you find it seems to be good. And it can be very, very intimidating. So we're going to jump into that. I'm going to give you some ideas and ways that I like to approach different types of grasses. And hopefully it helps you catch a few more fish. Now, before I do jump into that, I do want to remind you that I do have a Tackle Warehouse affiliate deal. So if you happen to be looking to purchase some tackle and want to support the YouTube channel, please click on the link in the video description that takes you to Tackle Warehouse using my affiliate link. A small portion of that comes back to the channel. It helps make more content so that everyone hopefully learns to catch a few more fish. I also have a members only channel, so if you're looking for more content and direct access to me, check that out. You can go to the YouTube homepage, click the join button, find out everything you need to know about that. And hopefully it's information like this that brings you back to the channel. So let's talk a little bit about grass. Grass is one of those things that, depending on where you live in the country, it generally, for the most part, does act in a similar manner where it dies off some over the cold water periods, and then in the spring starts to grow up to the point where it may get to the point where it actually chokes out certain parts of a lake. But ultimately, the cycle is it grows heavily in the spring through the summer. Once the water starts to cool off a little bit, it starts dying off. And then, come around January, February, you're usually talking about the smallest amount of grass as possible. Now, in most instances, you always have some grass growth. Even up in the North Country, you'll have some green grass that survives throughout the winter months. And generally speaking, if you can find those areas that still are green and healthy grass during the winter months, those are good areas to fish, even though you don't have nearly as much grass as you have in the summer months. Now, the one thing I can tell you about fishing grass, you need to approach it as you would fishing isolated targets. And I guess what I mean by that is when you have hundreds of acres of grass flat, you need to try to find those irregularities that are within the grass. They could be anything from a point, it could be a grass edge, it could be holes in the grass, it could be where grass meet up against something else, whether that's a dock post or a rock cluster, or maybe there's a laydown tree, or maybe you have two different types of grass that meet up where you have milfoil that butts up against coontail or cabbage or something along those lines. Anytime you have some sort of irregularity in the grass or some sort of change, those generally become very good areas that congregate fish. Now, we know almost all fish species in lakes will utilize the grass. Everything from your bait fish all the way up to your biggest predators. So from that standpoint, they're all using it. But generally what that means is you don't have whole giant areas that have fish. You'll have very specific areas that the fish are utilizing for different reasons. Sometimes we don't even know what it is. Sometimes I think it's just a matter of that's where that good school of fish is on that day. 2 days later, they might be 100 yards down. But generally speaking, fish relate back to objects. So if you have something specific in the grass that those fish are relating to, they're usually going to be good, not just from day to day, but sometimes year to year, because if there is a specific object in the water that's changing the grass growth for some reason, whether that's maybe a hard spot, a rock cluster, maybe you've got a stump, things like that. Generally, the grass grows back in the same areas year to year, but if there's something that prevents it from growing, it's going to be good. So if you can identify good spots on one day, there is a good chance that at least for a period during that year, if not future years, that same area is going to be really good. But I cannot stress enough, it's very important for you to try to break down the best areas to fish by looking for those irregularities. Now, if you're talking about baits, I generally think you've got three different ways to approach grass. You've got your slow moving baits, which generally are going to consist of like worms and jigs, things where you're really trying to pick apart the grass. So maybe you're actually flipping into the grass and you're working a very small area. Maybe in some instances you have grass growth that's just not so thick where you can actually work a worm through it. But a lot of your slender profiles will perform very well. So your soft stick baits, your ribbon tail worms, most of your soft plastics, whether they're Texas rigged in some form or fashion, that's a good way to go about it. Now, the unfortunate part with that is a lot of that is a very slow, meticulous way to fish. So I don't generally like to fish slow moving baits until I feel very confident that I'm fishing an area where I know the fish are at. What I prefer to do generally is fish with a moving bait. Now, you've kind of got two different categories of moving baits. You've got baits that are really good submerged and baits that are really good on the surface. For your submergent baits, we're talking about things like a swim jig, a vibrating jig, a lipless crankbait, swimming worms like a speed worm, things like that that are cast and wind baits that allow you to cover a lot of water and allow you to bring your bait back relatively weedless. Now, anytime you're talking about fishing grass, you're going to get grass hung up on your baits at times. But if you can rip those baits free, bring them over the top so they tick the tops of the grass, you can really try to find good concentrations of fish. So I would much rather go into an area fishing large swaths of grass with moving baits. The other category of moving bait are your topwaters. So in some instances, you may have grass that just is that far under the surface and it's hard to work a submergent moving bait. In other instances, you may have grass that's got plenty of room to do a cast and wind bait, but the problem is you have a lot of floating grass in that area, or you've got other areas where the grass hits the surface, and a topwater bait is just the best way to retrieve your bait over the tops of the grass. So you've got topwater baits that really excel in grass would be things like your hollow belly frogs, your toad style frogs, which are more of your cast and retrieve soft plastic toads like a horny toad. You've got your buzz baits can be really good. Any real topwater bait, if you can work it, a buzz bait can be good. If you can throw a plopper style bait like a chopo, something like that is great, assuming you don't get hung up in floating grass debris. But the key takeaway here is in some instances, you only have so much room between the grass and the surface, or you just have, holes that you're fishing where you can't fish a moving bait very productively. But a topwater can be excellent because most of the time those fish could be right up under the surface if you're talking about fishing around grass. So I'll utilize topwaters and moving baits to find the areas where I like to fish first. And then at that point, that's when I slow down, really pick it apart with wacky rigs and your ribbon tail style worms, things like that, to really just try to pick apart the area that I know the fish are in. It's critical though to just keep in mind that when you do catch a fish from a spot, try to continue to fish that exact area. Make more casts to the same hole in the grass, to the same grass point, because a lot of times you will get fish that school up. You'd be amazed how many times you can catch a fish on repeating casts from the exact same spot. It's similar to ledge fishing. If you get a school with 20 fish on it, you make the same cast, you can catch 15 fish in a row at times. I've had the same thing happen with grass where you keep throwing your bait right back into the same hole and you're catching fish, and it's just you've got a good school of fish in the grass. So hopefully these are a few things that you can take away to help you break down the lakes that you fish that have a lot of grass. This is the time of year where grass fishing really becomes really good. From now all the way up to the point where it starts dying off to the point where there's just not much left at all. So let me know in the comment section, do you have other grass tips you want to share with the other viewers? If so, please leave it for us to see in the comment section. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do that. And stay tuned, we'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.